After the initial meeting aboard the International Space Station, the Concorde delegation requests a tour of Earth's major population centers. Their true purpose is thinly disguised. They want to assess humanity's industrial capacity and military readiness. Admiral Chen, suspecting their motives, ensures they see exactly what humanity wants them to see. In New Shanghai, the delegation marvels at the gleaming arcologies and efficient public transit systems. Vexlar's aide, sub-arbitrator Kolnarath, constantly scans the infrastructure with a device disguised as a diplomatic translator. Your species builds with surprising efficiency, Kolnarath notes, mandibles twitching in what humans now recognize as reluctant admiration. Yet we detect minimal defensive capabilities in your urban centers. We found that separating civilian and military infrastructure reduced collateral damage. Chen explains, deliberately using terminology the aliens find disturbing. What she doesn't mention is that New Shanghai's foundations contain emergency shelters capable of housing 10 million civilians, a precaution from the resource wars that ended 30 years ago. During a formal dinner at the United Earth headquarters in Geneva, Vexlar asks about the strange monuments dotting Earth's landscape, steel obelisks and stone arches that their scans reveal serve no practical purpose. President Adeyemi answers with practiced diplomacy. They commemorate our conflicts and those who perished in them, reminders of what we've overcome. Curious, Vexlar responds, you celebrate your most destructive moments. We honor sacrifice, Chen corrects, and preserve the lessons those sacrifices taught us. Later that evening, when the aliens retire to their accommodations, Chen meets with her small team in a secure room beneath Lake Geneva. The facility, carved during the Third World War as a last resort command center, remains off all official records. They're cataloging our weaknesses, Dr. Mehta reports, analyzing surveillance footage of the aliens' conversations among themselves. Their language contains untranslatable terms that seem to classify species by threat level. Major Williams brings up holographic displays of the Concorde vessel's energy signatures. Their ship maintains combat readiness even during diplomatic functions. Shield harmonic cycling, weapons on standby. Could be standard procedure, Commander Jao suggests, or they're preparing for something. Chen reviews the data, her cybernetic eye processing patterns invisible to others. We need to know more about their previous encounters with pre-FTL species, access their databases during tomorrow's technological exchange. That violates diplomatic protocol, Meta cautions, and their scanning of our defense grids doesn't. Chen counters. They're assessing us as a potential threat or resource. We need to know which, and what happened to the last species that received a welcome like ours. As the meeting adjourns, Chen remains alone in the war room, studying historical footage of humanity's conflicts. From ancient battles to modern orbital engagements, the display transitions to current news. Celebrations of first contact across Earth, civilians waving in excitement as Concorde shuttles fly overhead. They're not ready, she whispers to herself. None of us are. She activates a secure communication line to Luna Base Alpha, where Earth's most advanced quantum computers maintain vigilance over the solar system. Initiate Protocol Cassandra, she orders. Authorization Gen 7 to 7 Omega 9. A synthetic voice responds. Protocol Cassandra initiated. Contingency scenarios in development. Probability of hostile intent from Galactic Concorde. Calculating. The screen flashes a preliminary assessment, 78.3% probability. Chen closes her eyes momentarily. When they open, there's a cold resolve in them. The same expression worn by countless human commanders throughout history when preparing their people for war. The Mariana Trench facility, codenamed Leviathan, had been officially decommissioned after the Antarctic Peace Accords. Like many of humanity's most advanced military installations, its decommissioning was largely for public record. 3 kilometers beneath the Pacific surface, Admiral Chen's team works tirelessly to decrypt the fragments of Concorde communications they've intercepted. Their encryption is unlike anything we've encountered, Dr. Oko says, fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. The AI specialist hasn't slept in 36 hours, sustained by military-grade stimulants and professional curiosity. But their fundamental mathematical principles are surprisingly predictable. Major Williams studies tactical simulations reconstructed from the intercepted data. Look at this engagement in the Cygnus sector. The Concorde vessels maintain perfect formation even under fire. No adaptation, no individual initiative. Because they've never needed it, Commander Zhao observes. According to these records, they haven't faced meaningful resistance in over 6,000 years. Their tactics have become ritualized, symbolic rather than practical. Chen absorbs this information, the tactical implications unfolding in her mind. They fight wars like we play chess, with agreed-upon rules and movements. Exactly, Williams confirms. And they classify their opponents. These designations here, he highlights alien script translated by their systems, seem to categorize species by their resistance patterns. Most surrender after a symbolic display of force. And the ones that don't? Chen asks. Williams' expression darkens. Limited examples. But there's evidence of at least 3 species that resisted beyond the acceptable parameters. They no longer appear in any subsequent records. The implications hang heavy in the recycled air of the underwater bunker. Meanwhile, above ground, the Concorde assessment team continues its evaluation of human capabilities. Their inspection of the Nevada facility concludes, and they request access to the Lunar Defense Array, a network of telescopes and sensors ostensibly designed for tracking near-Earth objects. We are particularly interested in your early warning systems, Kelfa explains to Dr. Mehta as their shuttle ascends toward the moon. Such technology is valuable for integration into the Concorde's protective network. What the aliens don't know is that Mehta's neural implant transmits everything he sees and hears directly to Leviathan. The lunar base they're about to visit has been carefully prepared. Its true capabilities masked behind facade systems that appear less advanced than they actually are. As they approach the lunar installation, Mehta engages the assessment team in carefully crafted conversation. The array was primarily designed for asteroid detection after the Tunguska Aya incident in 2079. Defensive capabilities were added later, almost as an afterthought. Kelfa's multifaceted eyes blink in sequence, a gesture of dismissal. Primitive kinetic weapons and rudimentary energy shields, sufficient for planetary debris, but hardly relevant to galactic security standards. Mehta feigns mild embarrassment. We're still developing our understanding of cosmic threats. Beneath the visible lunar base, automated systems record the Concorde scan patterns, feeding them directly to Project Lazarus, the dormant planetary defense network now silently reactivating. Each alien scan provides valuable data on their sensor capabilities, data that will prove crucial in the coming conflict. Back in Leviathan, Chen reviews a classified historical database, records of weapons systems and military technologies deemed too destabilizing for deployment during Earth's internal conflicts. Projects with names like Prometheus, Aegis, and Thanatos. Doomsday weapons developed but never used, their blueprints preserved for an existential threat that never materialized. Until now. Begin limited production, she orders. Distributed manufacturing, maximum security protocols, priority to defensive systems, and countermeasures specifically tailored to Concorde technology. The Security Council hasn't authorized. Williams begins. They will, Chen interrupts. But we can't afford to wait for bureaucracy to catch up to reality. The Concorde isn't assessing us as potential allies. She gestures to the decoded transmissions. They're assessing us as property. The Olympus Mons Command Center represents humanity's most ambitious military installation, carved directly into the largest volcano in the solar system. Its existence had been disguised as a scientific research station, its true purpose known only to the highest echelons of Earth's defense hierarchy. As representatives from every human colony gather in the central chamber, the atmosphere is tense but resolute. The room contains a curious mix of military uniforms and civilian attire, a reflection of humanity's distributed defense doctrine developed after the Unification Wars. The Concorde fleet will reach optimal deployment positions within 18 hours, announces Colonel Fatima Rais, Mars Defense Coordinator. Holographic projections show the alien vessels spreading throughout the solar system in a standard encirclement pattern. They're positioning for simultaneous strikes against all major population centers. Just as they've done with 17 other species, Commander Zhao adds, referring to the intelligence they've extracted from Concorde communications. Standard subjugation protocol. Overwhelming show of force, minimal actual engagement. A representative from the Ganymede colonies, her skin pale from generations under Jupiter's weak sunlight, raises her hand. What exactly are we facing? Numbers, capabilities. Admiral Chen gestures, and the holographic display shifts to detailed schematics of Concorde vessels. 87 capital ships, approximately 300 support craft. Their technology surpasses ours in propulsion, energy generation, and shield capabilities. Conventional engagement would be costly. Then why are we here? Asks a voice from the Europa delegation. If we can't match them directly. Because conventional engagement isn't the human way. Chen interrupts. Not when we're outmatched. A ghost of a smile crosses her face. And throughout our bloody history, humanity has developed quite a talent for unconventional warfare. She activates another display, this one showing the solar system from a strategic perspective, highlighting key positions and resources. Operation Prometheus isn't about matching the Concorde ship for ship or weapon for weapon. It's about revealing their fundamental misconception about warfare. The display zooms in on Earth, then extends outward to show its colonies and installations throughout the system. Thousands of small dots begin to illuminate, some in orbit, others on planetary surfaces or hidden in asteroid fields. For 10,000 years, we prepared to fight ourselves, Chen continues. We built redundancies upon redundancies. We developed weapons designed to counter our own best technologies. We created command structures that could survive decapitation strikes. The representatives watch in growing amazement as more and more systems activate across the display. Defense platforms, communication arrays, and weapons systems that even some military leaders hadn't known existed. The Concorde expects us to operate as they do, with centralized command, standardized responses, and predictable tactics. They expect our resistance to crumble once they demonstrate superior firepower. Chen's cybernetic eye glows subtly as she surveys the room. We will show them the error of that assumption. She taps a final command, and the holographic display transforms into a multi-layered battle plan, unlike anything the representatives have seen before. It doesn't resemble a conventional military strategy with clear fronts and reserve positions. Instead, it looks almost organic, a complex, adaptive system with countless interdependent elements. Each colony, each outpost, each vessel operates with local autonomy but shared purpose, Chen explains. No central nodes to target, no command hierarchy to disrupt. The Concorde doesn't merely face Earth's military. They face the collective military genius of human history. From Alexander to Zhukov, from guerrilla insurgencies to space-based defense networks. President Adeyemi, who has remained silent throughout the presentation, finally speaks. What you're proposing will forever change humanity's place in the galaxy. If we commit to this course, there's no return to innocence. Chen nods solemnly. They've already decided our fate, Madam President. We're simply refusing to accept it. After a moment of heavy silence, Adeyemi straightens. Then let the record show that humanity didn't fire the first shot, but we will most certainly fire the last. Initiate Operation Prometheus. As Admiral Chen's cybernetic eye transmits the activation code, humanity's dormant war machine stirs to life across the solar system. Beneath the ice sheets of Europa, fusion reactors power up massive electromagnetic launchers. In the asteroid belt, mining charges reconfigured as weapons lock onto Concorde fleet positions. Throughout Earth's orbit, satellites classified as decommissioned shed their civilian disguises. Aboard the Concorde flagship Inevitable Harmony, Vexillar receives Chen's message with mandibles clicking in agitation. The human delegation has already departed, returning to Earth via shuttle, a courtesy the High Arbitrator now regrets extending. They cannot possibly believe they can resist, he says to his command staff. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Our cultural database indicates they've never even achieved unified planetary governance until recently. Preliminary scans detect unusual power fluctuations throughout the system, reports a junior officer, four-fingered hands moving rapidly across control surfaces, consistent with systems activation. Expected resistance, Vexillar dismisses. Deploy subjugation pattern Delta. Target their primary orbital infrastructure first, standard procedure for pre-FTL species. The Concorde fleet begins to move with practiced precision, breaking into predetermined attack formations. Their tactics have worked flawlessly for millennia. Overwhelming force applied to critical infrastructure, followed by targeted strikes against military installations. Once a species' defensive capabilities are neutralized, resistance typically collapses within hours. What happens next defies all Concorde strategic models. As the alien vessels approach Earth's orbital zone, they encounter no organized defense fleet. Instead, thousands of small, seemingly uncoordinated objects accelerate toward them. The Concorde tactical systems classify most as debris or microsatellites, too small to pose significant threats to their capital ships. This assessment changes when the first wave detonates, not with conventional explosions, but with precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses tuned specifically to the frequency of Concorde shield systems, a vulnerability identified through careful analysis of their scanner emissions during the assessment phase. Shields fluctuating on 17 vessels, reports the tactical officer, her composure cracking for the first time. How could they know the resonance frequencies? That's impossible. Before Vexillar can respond, the second phase of humanity's defense reveals itself. From Earth's surface, ancient missile silos, many dating back to the Cold War but maintained in secret, launch their payloads. These aren't the nuclear weapons the Concorde expected and prepared for, but something far more sophisticated. Hypersonic kinetic penetrators with quantum guidance systems designed to exploit the momentary shield gaps created by the EMP attack. On Mars, colonial defense batteries target Concorde landing craft attempting to deploy ground forces. The weapons are primitive by galactic standards, mass drivers using electromagnetic acceleration, but employed with devastating tactical precision. Concorde troops, accustomed to ritualized ground combat with predetermined engagement zones, find themselves under attack before they even exit their landing craft. In her command shuttle returning to Earth, Admiral Chen receives status reports from throughout the system. Her expression remains neutral, but there's a glint of satisfaction in her organic eye. Phase 1 proceeding as anticipated, reports her tactical officer. Concorde fleet formations are breaking down as they respond to distributed attacks. And our casualties? Chen asks, her voice calm but concerned. Within projected parameters, automated systems absorbing the brunt of their counterattacks. Chen nods, then activates a general broadcast to all human forces. Her message is brief, but resonates across military channels throughout the solar system. Remember your training. Remember our history. Every battle humanity has fought against itself has prepared us for this moment. We don't need to match their technology. We need only outlast their understanding. Activation Phase 2. Across the solar system, the second wave of humanity's defense begins, not with grand fleets or superweapons, but with thousands of small, independent actions, a strategy no centralized military could anticipate or counter effectively. The beast of human warfare, evolved through millennia of conflict, is fully awake. 16 hours into the battle, the Concorde tactical grid is in unprecedented disarray. The elegant formations that have served them for millennia have dissolved into scattered defensive clusters as their ships struggle to counter attacks coming from seemingly everywhere at once. In the command center of the inevitable harmony, Vexillar faces a situation no Concord High Arbitrator has experienced in recorded history: the possibility of defeat. How are they coordinating these attacks? He demands, slamming a four-fingered hand against the tactical display. We've neutralized 3 command centers already. Unknown High Arbitrator responds, his second-in-command, mandibles tight with stress. Their attack patterns shift faster than our predictive algorithms can process. It's as if each human unit operates with both autonomy and collective purpose simultaneously. On Earth, the situation appears grim from a civilian perspective. Concord energy weapons have breached the atmosphere in several locations, targeting what their intelligence identified as military installations. Massive evacuation protocols activate as urban centers empty into underground shelters. Infrastructure created during humanity's own conflicts now serving its original purpose. But these civilian movements hide a deeper strategy. Each evacuated city becomes a complex defensive position, with automated systems and militia units using the urban terrain to maximum advantage. When Concord landing craft finally breach Earth's orbital defenses and attempt ground deployment, they find not panicked populations but prepared resistance. In Earth orbit, Major Williams coordinates the defense from the command module of the UES Thermopylae. The vessel itself is unremarkable, a retrofitted transport ship with minimal offensive capabilities. But from here, Williams orchestrates what appears to the Concord as a maddeningly unpredictable defense. Carrier Group 7, execute dispersal pattern Echo, he orders. Mining coalition vessels implement Fabian Protocol 3. The seemingly random collection of Earth vessels, everything from military frigates to repurposed asteroid miners, responds with practiced precision. What looks like a retreat is actually a carefully choreographed maneuver to draw pursuing Concord ships into kill zones established hours earlier. "Sir," reports a communications officer, "we're receiving transmissions from Concord vessels. They're attempting to establish surrender protocols." Williams smiles grimly. They think we operate like they do, that if they capture our command vessel, our forces will stand down. He opens a direct channel to Admiral Chen. They're starting to target command ships specifically. Moving to Contingency Charlie. Across the system, human forces implement the next phase of their strategy. Every vessel designated as a command ship begins broadcasting contradictory orders on frequencies they know the Concord are monitoring. Simultaneously, the actual command structure shifts to a rotating network of seemingly minor craft and installations, none remaining in authority long enough to become a valuable target. On Mars, the Colonial Defense Force has transformed the planet's famous dust storms into a weapon. Microscopic drones, millions of them, ride the windstorms and attach themselves to Concord landing craft, methodically degrading hull integrity and sensor arrays through coordinated micro-impacts. The captured Concord subcommander, now in a secure interrogation facility beneath the Himalayan mountains, watches tactical displays with growing disbelief. "This is not warfare as we understand it," he tells Major Williams. "There is no honor in this chaos. Honor is a luxury of the stronger power," Williams responds, studying the aliens' reactions carefully. "We fight with what we have against what you have. That's the only equation that matters." The subcommander's multifaceted eyes blink rapidly, a sign of cognitive distress. Human synapsychologists now understand. But your casualties must be enormous. No species sacrifices population centers to military necessity. Williams' expression hardens. "That's where you're wrong. Human history is written in exactly those sacrifices. The difference is," he gestures to the displays showing civilian evacuation procedures, "we've gotten better at minimizing them." By the end of the battle's first day, the Concord has lost nearly 40% of their invasion force. And more importantly, they've lost something they didn't know could be lost: the predictability of warfare itself. On Proxima Centauri, the agricultural colony's transformation from peaceful settlement to military stronghold nears completion. Colonial Governor Maya Okafor, a former Earth Defense Force commander, oversees final preparations from an underground command center built beneath the primary hydroponics facility. Status on civilian shelters. She asks her operations chief. 97% occupancy, Governor. Remaining personnel are essential infrastructure or volunteer militia. Okafor studies the tactical display showing the approaching Concorde vessels, 15 capital ships, far more than expected for a small colonial outpost. They're learning, she murmurs, allocating disproportionate resources to ensure victory here. Should we request reinforcements from Seoul? Her second-in-command asks. Okafor shakes her head. That's not the strategy. Each human settlement stands alone but fights as part of the whole. She activates the colony-wide communication system, her voice reaching every bunker and defensive position. Remember your training. Remember why we came to the stars. We didn't cross the void between suns only to surrender our future to the first advanced species we encountered. When the Concorde ships enter orbit, their initial scans detect exactly what they expect. Scattered settlements with minimal defenses, most inhabitants huddled in primitive shelters. Their tactical AI calculates a 98.7% probability of immediate surrender once ground forces establish dominance. The first landing ships deploy with perfect precision, touching down in the designated subjugation zones their protocols have used successfully on dozens of worlds. Armored troops march out in formation, weapons charged but not expecting significant resistance. They never see the attack coming. The seemingly empty agricultural fields conceal a network of automated defense systems, repurposed farming equipment transformed into weapons platforms. Harvester drones modified with cutting tools target Concorde armor joints. Irrigation systems pump superheated steam into landing zones. Sensor jamming devices, disguised as atmospheric monitoring stations, disrupt the invaders' communications. Meanwhile, in the TAV CD system, the mining fleet's apparent panic serves its purpose perfectly. The Concorde pursuit force breaks formation to chase down scattered human vessels, precisely as Commander Lai Zhao had predicted. Behavioral psychology applies across species, she had explained during the planning phase. Their military has never faced defeat. Their confidence will make them predictable. As the Concorde ships spread out, focusing on individual targets, they cross invisible thresholds carefully calculated by human strategists. The miners activate their secret weapons, fusion drives deliberately modified to overload, creating localized gravity distortions that tear apart pursuing vessels. Mining explosives, normally used to break apart asteroids, detonate in precisely timed sequences that create cascading energy waves. The Concorde commanders, trained in military academies that teach formation combat and overwhelming force, have no protocols for this type of asymmetric warfare. Their attempts to regroup and establish defensive positions only create target clusters for the next wave of human attacks. In the Epsilon Eridani system, Commander Zhao's infiltration team accesses the Concorde's central communication hub using credentials extracted from captured data cores. Rather than simply destroying the facility, an action that would trigger immediate security protocols, they implement something far more devastating: subtle data corruption. We don't want to blind them, Zhao explains to her team as they upload the specialized malware. We want them to see exactly what we choose for them to see. The algorithm, developed by Earth's best cyber warfare specialists, creates discrepancies between actual fleet positions and reported locations, introduces random delays in tactical communications, and occasionally transposes target coordinates by just enough to render precision strikes ineffective. Throughout human-controlled space, the pattern repeats. Concorde forces, expecting quick subjugation of isolated colonies, instead encounter prepared resistance tailored specifically to exploit their tactical weaknesses. The doctrine they've relied upon for millennia: overwhelming force applied to break enemy morale. proves useless against an enemy that expects to be overwhelmed but refuses to be broken. The insectoid Kelisari revolution spreads across 3 adjacent systems with unprecedented speed. Centuries of Concord control crumble in weeks as the 8-limbed species implements tactics clearly inspired by human resistance methods. Their natural hive mind communication, once suppressed by Concord dampening fields, now serves as an untraceable command network. High Overlord Zextal convenes an emergency session of the Concord Council, the first such meeting in 700 years. Representatives from 46 dominant species gather in the orbital chambers of harmony, their vessels surrounded by unprecedented security. This human contagion threatens the very foundation of galactic order, Zextal declares, his ceremonial armor now bearing actual battle damage, another unprecedented development. Their resistance methods spread like a mimetic virus to species we've controlled for millennia. A representative from the Valaxian hegemony, their gelatinous form contained in an ornate mobility sphere, pulses with agitation. The humans themselves are merely a symptom. The true disease is our complacency. Our military doctrines haven't evolved in thousands of years. Exactly why we must crush them quickly and absolutely, Zextal responds. Before more species absorb their dangerous innovations, the Council's decision is unanimous. Commit the Guardian Armadas in their entirety, a force not fully deployed since the Third Expansion era. The massive fleet, comprising over 3,000 capital ships and their support vessels, begins the hyperspatial journey to the Sol system. What they don't realize is that human intelligence has penetrated even this most secure of Concord deliberations. Dr. Oko's adaptive algorithms have compromised the quantum entanglement networks the Council believed unhackable, their security designed to repel attacks following predictable patterns. They're coming with everything they have, Admiral Chen informs the United Earth Defense Council. The meeting takes place in a temporary facility beneath the ruins of Old Geneva, parts of the city sacrificed in the initial Concord attacks. Exactly as we anticipated. President Adeyemi, her face showing the strain of weeks of warfare, studies the projected force estimates. Can we withstand this? Not conventionally, Chen admits, which is why conventional defense isn't our strategy. She activates a holographic display showing the Sol system, but with a critical difference. Operation Phantom Switch is already underway. Throughout the system, human forces are executing an elaborate shell game. Military assets relocate to unexpected positions. Automated factories, previously manufacturing weapons, now produce thousands of decoys emitting false signatures. Civilian installations power down to minimize detection, while decommissioned satellites and space debris are rigged with minimal power sources to appear as active defense platforms. Most importantly, the bulk of Earth's remaining battle-capable ships have vanished from the system entirely. They expect to find us here, defending our homeworld, Chen explains. Instead, they'll find a ghost system, enough apparent resistance to keep them occupied, while our actual forces move to implement the next phase. Major Williams points to movement patterns at the edge of the tactical display. The Guardian Armadas are splitting into tactical groups. They're being more cautious after their initial losses, which only helps us, Chen notes. The more dispersed they are, the more effective our counter-strategy becomes. Far from Earth, human strike teams are already in motion, not toward the approaching Concord fleets, but toward systems where the Concord's control has been weakened by the redeployment of their forces. Commander Zhao leads a diplomatic mission to the recently liberated Kelisari, establishing the first formal alliance between humans and another sentient species. Your revolt inspired others, she tells the Kelisari hive speaker, the insectoid's compound eyes reflecting the holographic display of spreading rebellions. But inspiring resistance was only phase 1. The hive speaker's antennae twitch with curiosity. What follows resistance? Zhao activates a detailed tactical presentation, the battle plan that Admiral Chen has named Solar Flare. Revolution, she answers simply, not just for Earth, but for every species the Concord has subjugated. As delegates from across the galaxy gather in the Grand Hall of Harmonies, the contrast couldn't be more striking. Species that for millennia had only interacted through Concord-approved channels now engage directly, exchanging ideas and experiences without mediation. Former enemies discover common ground. Ancient rivalries, many deliberately maintained by Concord policies, begin to dissolve in the face of shared liberation. Admiral Chen, now bearing both the scars of warfare and the mantle of diplomacy, moves through the assembly with purpose. Her cybernetic eye, originally designed for tactical analysis, now serves a different function, cataloging faces, translating languages, and identifying opportunities for alliance. The Mithridian delegation has concerns about security guarantees, reports Dr. Mehta, now serving as her diplomatic advisor. Their system borders 3 Concord strongholds. Chen nods, making her way toward the crystalline beings hovering near the eastern alcove. As she passes the Kelisari representatives, their antennae dip in respect, a gesture once reserved only for their hive speakers. In a quiet moment between negotiations, High Arbitrator Vexlar approaches Chen. The once imposing Concord official now represents only a faction of his species, those who recognize the inevitability of change. His ceremonial armor has been replaced by simpler diplomatic attire. "There is something I still cannot comprehend," he admits, mandibles moving hesitantly. "Your species possessed the capability to utterly destroy us. Your Operation Solar Flare could have targeted our core worlds while our fleets were dispersed. Yet you chose targeted strikes against military installations, deliberately sparing civilian centers." Chen studies him carefully before responding. "That choice is precisely why we won." Explain. "Throughout human history, we learned that victory through annihilation is temporary," she says. "The truly enduring victories come when you transform enemies into allies. We didn't want to replace the Concord with a human empire. We wanted to replace the entire concept of galactic dominance with something better." Across the hall, the drafting of the Galactic Concord Act continues. Representatives from 87 species, many only recently freed from subjugation, work together to create governance principles that protect autonomy while fostering cooperation. The document bears clear human influences, concepts of self-determination, and checks against centralized power, but incorporates perspectives from civilizations far older than Earth's. As the final provisions receive approval, President Adeyemi joins Chen near the observation dome that overlooks the host planet's twin moons. The defense ministers are concerned, Adeyemi confides. Many want to maintain full military readiness, despite the peace accords. Chen watches as ships from dozens of worlds move through carefully coordinated orbital patterns, a dance of cooperation replacing the rigid formations of Concord control. "They're not wrong to be cautious," she acknowledges. "Peace requires more than documents and goodwill. It needs guardians." She activates a small holographic projector, displaying the current disposition of human military assets throughout known space. Many have indeed stood down from combat readiness, but key defensive systems remain vigilant. The war machine hasn't disappeared. It has evolved once again. "We're establishing joint defense initiatives with 17 former Concord worlds," Chen explains. "Not occupation or control. Partnership. Each contributes according to their capabilities. Each maintains sovereignty over their forces." Adeyemi smiles slightly. "Teaching them our approach to warfare." "Teaching them our approach to peace," Chen corrects, "which paradoxically requires understanding war better than your adversaries." As the formal signing ceremony begins, delegates from across the galaxy take their positions. The document they'll ratify represents something unprecedented, not peace imposed through dominance, but cooperation forged through mutual respect. Chen takes her place among Earth's representatives, her expression solemn yet hopeful. Humanity's war machine, awakened by necessity, had accomplished what no one thought possible. It had broken a million-year cycle of domination and created something new in its place. Not through overwhelming technology, not through superior numbers, but through the uniquely human ability to learn from conflict, to adapt to impossible odds, and to imagine a future beyond the patterns of the past.